expressed on the following program are not necessarily those of WPSL. However, we're the ones who've encouraged you all along to like and share them on social media and with all your friends and neighbors because it's the science of caring. CareBag presents Careology with your host, the one and only Miles McGrath.
Cliff, thank you so much. It's so good to be here today on this April Fool's. So just a warning to
don't look now, but your shoes are untied.
I see that. Thank
Somebody
you.
already get that?
They did. Thanks for having me on the show, Cliff. Appreciate it. I've got an awesome guest. I'm going to introduce in a little bit, Greg Hollen with Stair Step Dog Training. But before we get into that, I want to talk a little bit about Careology. And just for those that don't realize, Careology is part of CareBag. And what CareBag does is provide dignity in the way of mobile shower units for a homeless population, or we like to say our neighbors without walls. We've been doing that for over 6 years now. We have mobile pantry vans that travel to food distribution areas where we provide items that aren't sometimes provided with other things like diapers, Depends, hygiene products like soap and shampoo and toothpaste, feminine products, things like that. So we deliver those throughout the Treasure Coast. And we have mobile shower units that are in locations where folks that, again, don't have a permanent home can have access to proper hygiene to provide them with the dignity. And if you could just imagine what it would be like not having a shower for weeks on end and getting that relief and feeling clean, that's what we strive to do at CareBag. And again, the organization was started by Roseanne Brown, and she asked me to be here today to talk about that. We had a great fundraising event over the weekend at Treasure Coast Lexus. They were kind enough to open up their location to us. We had a high tea fundraising that was amazing. Prizes were given away. Everybody had a good time, all in the name of providing awareness about what CareBag does, provide much needed funds. The next event is going to be on May 7th. It's going to be an all-female celebrity chef event at Fujiyama Steakhouse in Stewart. That's at 6 p.m. And if you're interested in going, I think they have all the celebrity chefs in line right now, but it's a fun time if you got a team of people, you want to have a good time together and enjoy a good meal and have somebody you know prepare it in front of you with all the flaming onions and all the things like that. It is so much fun to do. There's going to be raffles and prizes and whatnot. So visit our website, carebagfl.org, for more information. So that's a little bit about CareBag and what's going on right now. So in the name of awareness, one of the things that's near and dear to my heart are little four-legged critters. We call them dogs, canines, among other things. And we see people walking their dogs. We have dogs in our life. I know Roxy's got a dog in her life. And I'm not, Cliff, I'm not getting, I'm not hearing it anymore. I don't know if I'm still coming through or not. Yeah, okay. So there we go. So I have somebody who's in one of my networking groups, Greg Hollen, who owns a dog training company that I invited in here today because a lot of us have a connection with dogs. And what I learned from working with Greg is that the more we connect with our four-legged friends, it helps us connect with our fellow human beings. And that was kind of the connection I had and why I wanted to invite him on the show. So Greg, welcome to Careology. It's good to have you.
Good morning, Miles. It's a pleasure to be here.
And how long have you been training and working with dogs?
Wow, I started back 35 years ago when I started my journey in that, and I've been training dogs full time for 17 years.
Wow.
So 7 years down here, 10 years back up in Indiana.
That is, and would you agree with my opening statement that working with dogs has informed your relationship with human beings?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, the connection we can make with dogs applies to people also. We're not that different.
That's I'm glad we agree on that. I wasn't sure what you're going to say, but I had a little hint that you might agree. So tell us, like, we haven't got into this and you didn't know I was going to ask this, but I'm guessing that you had some childhood experience with dogs or some connection at a young age with dogs. Can you share kind of that first connection you had, or you can at least can remember?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
The first dog I really remember having was it was a German Shepherd Beagle mix that we had that looked kind of shaped like a German Shepherd, marked like a beagle, and about the size of a beagle. It was a weird looking dog. But as a child, I would take him, we'd go out and roam the fields. And plus, growing up in Indiana, I grew up on the south side of Indianapolis, but most of our family was in southern Indiana, down around Marengo and English. And so we were down there quite a bit. And, we always had dogs down there. And, my family raised beef cattle. So you was always around animals. And you learned, what is good for the animal. So that way you can have what's best.
Right. So what adventures did you and what was this dog's name?
The dog's name was Butch.
What adventures did you and Butch go on?
Oh, we used to, where I grew up on the south side before it built up, it was all farm fields and woods and trees. And we'd go through there and we would hunt squirrels and rabbits, anything that we could jump, anything. And then we had a creek we'd go and run through. It was just the normal boy and his dog stuff, really.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Were you able to feel a sense of communication with Butch?
Oh yeah, and the beauty of it is as a kid, and I see this today when I work with families and we work with a child, the children seem to get it quicker than the adults do.
Right.
Because I guess it's because they haven't, clouded their mind yet with all the rules. So they've learned to communicate in different ways where it isn't all about the words.
Exactly. So there's some body language.
It's all body language with dogs.
Yes. Yes. How did you bridge from that to, I'm sure you had other careers that you did before getting into dog training, but what was that aha moment where you said to yourself, I want to do this full time?
Well, I did home health care for 20 years. And I'd been in and out of a few different places, and they get bought out, and then so we're here's a severance package, get out. And the last place I worked at, I was regional operations manager for a company, an equipment company out of Chicago, and I was running Indiana for them. And they wanted to be able to take insurance, all that stuff. So we had to do our inspections. Of course, it was something I had done plenty of. So I set them up, got them all taken care of. And then the day of our last inspection, after it was over, they promptly fired me because I'd done what I needed to do. And that was when I decided I'm never going to allow somebody else to dictate my fate like that again. I'm just going to see if I can't just train dogs full time. And I've been doing it ever since.
So starting your own business, that was the bridge to taking charge of your reality.
April 6, 2007.
How
I
about
remember
that?
the date.
How about that? We're almost on the anniversary.
Absolutely.
Wow. So how many clients did you have when you first started?
Well, at the beginning, it was rough. It's like starting any business.
Right.
You got to be ready to ride out the hard times. Now, luckily, my wife's a dog groomer, so this is something that is deep inside of both of us. So we were able to get her grooming dogs for us, and then I was able to start building a client base. The first year was tight. We were having to rob Peter to pay Paul.
Right.
And then back and forth, and then once we got enough money moving in, then it really took off.
Wow.
And
you were saying in the parking lot, your May is almost booked up with new clients.
Yeah, I'm booking into June.
That's incredible. What an adventure. So what's fascinating to me is that I think is the experience, because when you came in our home and helped us with Cookie, our little puppy at the time who's now a year old. And I'm just so grateful for the experience that you had and what you taught. But there's the dog that's supposedly getting trained, and then there's the owners of the dog. What percentage is training the owner versus actually training the dog, would you say?
Okay, I'm going to be honest with you here. It isn't about really training the dog. Because if I can change how the owners approach the dog's behavior will change. Now, we go through the mechanics of, hey, let's teach them to sit. Let's teach them to lie down. Let's teach them to walk beside us.
Right.
But we have to change the owner's mindset from, oh, this is my cute little fur baby that can do anything
Right.
it wants, to, hey, my dog's kind of a jerk. I need to rein this in so I can take them places.
Take them places.
Mm-hmm.
So there's this expression, the tail's wagging the dog, that I've heard before, and I've used it in business where you have kind of something that's causing a situation that really shouldn't be. Like the leadership is not leading, for example, a company.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you have IT is leading the company where they're not the leadership, so we call it like the tail wagging the dog.
Mm-hmm.
You probably see that where the dog's in charge of the house.
Absolutely. And I've had cases where I've walked in to do an evaluation to see where everything stands.
Right.
And I'll put the dog on a leash and just kind of I'll take over.
Right.
And you can visibly see the dog relax because the dog really didn't want to be in charge. But if they're receiving no leadership, just due to how they're built, they'll try to take over because nobody else is doing it,
Right.
whether they want to or not.
Right.
Once again, it's a life lesson for people. You do what you have to do.
Right.
Period.
That's what I want to get into is we'll let things go, and then the next thing you know, the dog is, in places in the house doing things and, exhibiting behavior that is intolerable, but because you've put up with it,
Yeah.
that becomes acceptable.
Well, if you don't correct the behavior, it's no different with children. If you
Right.
don't correct a behavior, you're going to get more of it.
Right.
And so if you don't want your dog chewing on your furniture, well, then you have to make sure that you correct for that to teach them not to do it.
Right.
One of the godfathers of dog training was a man by the name of Captain Arthur Haggerty. He was out of New York, actually lived in West Palm for a while. And he had trained for movies and Broadway theater and all that, trained dogs for them. And he said it best. If you don't want your dog to do something, don't let them do it.
I remember you telling me that, and it echoes in my mind still to this day. It's if it's not an acceptable behavior, why tolerate it? But it's how to handle. It's easy to say, well, don't tolerate. How do you not tolerate it? What do you do to let the dog know that isn't acceptable without going over the edge?
See, and then that gets into,
Right.
I'm going to give you some of the very basics
Right.
rules that I follow. Number one, dogs don't talk. Everybody laughs when I say that, but if you watch people, watch them argue with their dog. Dogs don't talk. And number two, dogs are always wanting to be comfortable. Everything they do is about seeking their own comfort. So when, if you sit there and keep saying no to your dog, you have to ask yourself, what did I do to show my dog what this means?
Good point. Good point. We'll get into some of that. We'll use some examples, but I wanted to, what if, so you decided to make this your business, you decided to go full-time in the dog training, your wife does the dog grooming, and what have you, was there a moment where you're like, what have I gotten into here? What have you kind of learned about yourself through this experience? I know that you've learned a lot about people. The dogs have taught you a lot, but what have you kind of learned through this experience over the last, since 2007, you said?
Yeah, May of 2007.
Wow.
The big thing I learned, especially about myself, and this is key in dog training across the board, emotional control. It's all, you have to control your emotions. You
Yes.
don't let your emotions control you. because that's when you get frustrated and you're like, this dog just won't do it. And you get mad.
Yes.
Well, you can't be mad at the dog. The dog doesn't know what it's doing.
The thing is, you can be mad at the dog.
Well, you can be, but you would be wrong.
It's not going to be effective.
No,
It's not going to be
will
effective.
not.
It's not going to be effective.
But I run into this where people's like, the dog just won't do it. And it's like, well, this gets into the personality, just like with kids. You know, I had one kid that was pretty easy to get along with, and then I had another that was very headstrong. Different approaches to each one. Same thing goes with dogs. You can have two puppies from the same litter that have a wide range of personality traits.
So true.
And this one just requires a lot more effort to get through to it and a lot of repetition, where this one's just like, oh, yeah, okay, I'm cool.
Yeah. Yeah. So true. So how did that translate to what so the emotional control is the big thing you learned. Can you give me an example?
Well, I used to be a fairly angry person. You know, you could say I had some anger issues, absolutely. But with dogs, I can't be that way. If I'm having a bad day, the best thing I can do is go home, grab a dog, and start working with it, because then I can dump all that stress. I know the dog's going to just be the dog. They're the most honest creatures on the face of the planet. And I can just dump that stress and work the dog and deal. One of the things dogs, you asked about what dogs teach me. It's like, be in that moment. I have to be in that moment. I can't be thinking about, oh, that dude cut me off in traffic. Or I can't be thinking about, man, I got to write out bills later. I have to be in this moment.
You know, it's funny you say that. I noticed if I am walking Cookie and I'm looking at my cell phone, she will not exhibit the best behavior while I'm looking at my cell phone. But if I have the cell phone in the pocket and I'm really paying attention to her, she's getting my cues better than when I'm not, so it's amazing. It's all about my awareness at the moment. Am I really paying attention to the dog?
Yeah.
And then if I am, then I can do the small things that keep her, from pulling on the leash is my big thing, right? Pulling on the leash. But if I'm looking at my phone, I'm not paying attention to her, she's just going to say, well, he doesn't care. I'm just going to go back to my normal instinct, which is to pull.
Yeah. Well, if you think about that, it's true of anybody. The police never pay attention on 95. That's how come people do 110 miles an hour. But all of a sudden they start paying attention. Guess what? People are driving the speed limit.
Yeah. Interesting. Interesting. It's just... So you shared a story with me once, and let's not mention any names here, but somebody called you out, one of your clients, they got into a situation, their dog got off the leash and ended up going into the canal. And like, Greg, can you come out here? And that's something you do for your clients, like that, for an emergency situation, you came out.
Yeah. I mean, why wouldn't I?
Describe what happened with the situation. The dog is having a great time in the canal. Do not mention the person's name.
Oh, no, I will not.
And so what happened, and what's the lesson for all of us in this situation here?
It was a retriever. Now, I had worked with this dog in this family. It was a retriever. I ain't going to say what kind. But it had bolted out the front door. And they had one of the smaller water retention areas that drains off into the big canal there in South PSL. And he was having a high time just swimming back and forth in this murky water. So she calls me and she's like, we can't catch him. He won't come to us. She won't. So I drive down there. It was like 5 minutes from the house. So I drive down there. I get out of my truck. I walk over to the thing. I just look at him and say, let's go. And here he comes, right up to me, hook a leash to his collar, we're good. So I hand the leash to the owner, and the dog looks at me, looks at her, and immediately drags her into the canal. Physically drags her in.
I mean, it's funny now, but at the time...
Oh, no, it was funny then, too.
Well, not funny for the owner. But what happened there, that's the key piece for me, was when you told me that story, you handed the leash over, but what was the difference?
What was the difference?
Yeah, what was the difference? That's, to me, is the big key here.
Because she had stopped working with the dog. and he knew he could get away with it. All he knows about me is I'm going to enforce the rules. Now, see, a lot of people get this bad idea when you talk about discipline and enforcing the rules. They think it's this angry, stop that. No. Strict. When I say be strict, you need to be strict with yourself to follow the rules. The dog will follow suit with you.
Consistency.
That's
the key.
And to be the disciplinarian, the last thing you need to do is be angry. And doing all this, even when it's just like with us, when you're working, you want to have some fun with it.
Yes.
So we incorporate that into how we train dogs to make them want to listen to us.
Yes. To make it fun for them.
Oh, why not?
Yeah.
If it's a grind,
they're not going to want to do it.
We've all had that job.
Yeah.
And what do? We don't do that job anymore.
So the key is to make it fun and keep it consistent.
Yeah. That doesn't mean you don't correct when you need to.
Right.
But you deal with it, you're done, you move on.
And don't reward bad behavior.
And you don't reward bad behavior.
Yeah. Yes. Our dog does not beg at the table because we don't feed the dog from the table. But it's got a nose, so it knows some good things are happening up there. So it will come over, but because we don't feed it, it hasn't gotten to that begging behavior.
Well, like my own dog. Okay, he knows when I get an apple out, I'm probably going to give him a slice of it. But if I get out a banana, he didn't pay me any attention. He spotted the routine of it.
Right. So he knows the difference between the apple and the banana.
Oh, you got an apple, you always give me a slice. So here I am, give me my slice.
Right.
Oh, you got a banana, you don't give me any of that.
Amazing.
Well,
it's amazing.
I mean, that's just it. People will tell you, yeah, my dog's smart. Well, let's train this. Oh, I don't know if my dog can do that. And it's like, yeah, they can. They've been training you since you've had them.
That's so true. That's so true. In a little bit, we're going to take a little break here, but that story still sticks with me. So she got the leash. The dog pulls her in the canal or pulls her into the pond. Was the point driven home at that point? Like, did she realize it? Like, what happened?
I don't know.
Or was she just frustrated?
She was frustrated. I got the dog back out of the canal. She, squelched her way out of the canal. I ended up loading the dog into my vehicle and taking it back and walking it into their house for them.
Right.
Just so it didn't happen again.
Right.
And then I never heard from them. I think it could have been nothing more than they were just embarrassed that this happened and they know I'd worked with the dog.
Right.
They saw the dog behave for me. Don't be embarrassed.
Right.
Call me and we'll hook up and we'll get a lesson under your belt. When I work with somebody, as long as they're working with that dog, I'm going to help them.
Right. Period. I mean, I love that. What I love about that is that you went out there and you got the dog out of the situation. But the thing that I think for me, and just from my experience, it's not an overnight situation as the dog owner, is you have to be consistent, religiously consistent with your dog.
Absolutely.
And you can know the process, but you have to follow the process. And we get lazy, we get distracted. I know for myself, I get distracted, but we're going to come back with more here with Greg Hollen of Stair Step Dog Training here on Careology. Thank you for listening in, and we'll hear from our good sponsors here that keep this show going. Thank you.
Is your business back open 100%? Having trouble hiring a staff? Let WPSL, WSTU, and La Gigante help you fill those jobs in English and Spanish. Call us 340-1590 for details.
Why call Two Men in a Truck of the Treasure Coast? You want to move your business without moving a single meeting? You want it handled with no fuss. Lots of stuff, no time to move it? You need the pros that care. That's why you call Two Men in a Truck of the Treasure Coast. Family owned and operated franchise. Call 772-236-0827. 772-236-0827. Movers who care. Visit Two Men in a Truck, TreasureCoast.com. Create custom business signage that customers can't miss or resist. Let Design a Sign in Port St. Lucie help you get the job done right. Over 80 years combined experience. Get it right the first time. Call 772 772-337-4027 and tell them Roxy said to call. Remember, call 772-337-4020. Design a Sign in Port St. Lucie. If you could reimagine the way you buy a car, what would you do? Make it simple, make negotiations disappear, demand transparency, then experience amazing at your Treasure Coast Lexus dealer. Car Buying Simplified. Treasure Coast Lexus is a proud sponsor of Careology, caring and supporting for our community. Car Buying Simplified. Check out your Treasure Coast Lexus dealer.
This is WPSL Port St. Lucie.
And now, back to Careology, the science of caring. Once again, here's your host,
Miles McGrath.
Building up to that, have all the banks on. Now here he is, Miles McGrath.
Thank you, Cliff.
Growl for you.
Arr.
Miles McGrath.
Hey, we're talking about dogs today with Greg Hollen of Stair Step Dog Training. Greg, how, if somebody's listening to the show and they are interested in dog training, how would they get a hold of you?
I'm pretty easy to find. You can find me on Facebook. You can find me at my website.
What is your website?
My website is stairstepdogtraining.com. You can find me at Stairstep Dog Training on Facebook, Instagram.
Nice. And there's a lot of great reviews on there.
Mm-hmm.
What I want to talk about is a trip to the park. Let's imagine for a moment we're going to walk our dog to the park.
Okay.
Or you're in the park and you see, I walk my dog to the park every day, and I see various types of behavior with different dog owners. So if you could guide us some tips. The first tip is, as somebody walking their dog, what are some do's and don'ts with walking your dog in the park?
Well, first, you have to teach your dog how to walk with you. If you remember with Cookie, we didn't start in the park.
No.
We started at the house.
That's right.
Now, we did this because we can minimize the distraction.
Yes.
Then when we get to the park, the dog already has an idea of what's going on, and then we just continue our work. Now, with that, we teach the dog, hey, you have to ignore the squirrels and not try to drag me over.
Right.
You know, like your dog's a smaller dog. You can physically restrain that.
That's right.
But what happens if you have a 200-pound Mastiff?
You could pull your arm off.
They could pull you right over. And
Yeah.
I have had plenty of clients that have been injured by dogs, everything from broken hands, shoulders, legs,
Because they pulled.
because the
got
dog pulled them over and they've hit the ground hard.
Yeah.
I had a dog come in that it jumped on the owner's mother, who was in her 80s, and broke her hip. She spent 3 months in a rehab hospital.
Wow.
It was a friendly dog.
Just
It was just jumping on her because it was happy to see her. Now, when you go to the park with your dog, though, you know, a lot of people get locked into this of my dog has to be able to play with other dogs. But it's kind of like with us. I don't want to go play with everybody I meet. Why
Yes.
would I?
Yes.
And we all know this.
Yes.
Don't put your dog into the category of they should be able to play with everybody,
Right.
because not everybody wants to play with them.
Yes.
And that's how a lot of troubles start, where this dog will snap at your dog because your dog came over and tackled it out of the blue.
Yes.
Don't blame the dog that snapped at him. You need to blame your dog for being the jerk for tackling them out of the blue.
It's interesting. I mean, I was at an event at I won't mention the name of the place, but it was a place where we brought our dog inside. We were sitting in one part of the building, and somebody brought their dog inside of this location without a leash on. It looked like one of those Spud McKenzie dogs. I forget what those are.
Bull terriers.
Yes, had that elongated snout. So our dog is just doing its thing. We're on one side of the room. That dog's on the other side. Well, sure enough, the dog comes over without the leash, and at first things were going great.
Mm-hmm.
The next thing you know, dog is on top of our dog and growling and biting and just going to town. And then the owner finally comes over, has to pull the dog off. And I'm like, I let it go because what could I do in that situation? But my little voice could hear you, basically having a diatribe with this person about the many things that they did wrong in that situation.
I'm not allowed to say on the radio what I would say.
Right. But to make matters worse, there was somebody sitting on the ground by where this dog was, and they weren't aware. I mean, they should have been after what had happened, how aggressive this dog was. So the dog started doing the same thing that the person started biting on this person because they were on the ground, asserting its dominance over this person. So we had that incident happened, and the person didn't want to discipline their dog, and they didn't want to do anything because they felt this was just like natural dog behavior. So I just witnessed this. I'm like scratching my head. How could this occur? You can't. If you can't control your dog, you certainly can't have it off a leash in a public situation like that.
And I see this all the time. And like trainers will go somewhere and they'll video it where, hey, we're in this store off leash with our dog. Well, there's leash laws, they exist. We have to follow them. We're no different than anybody else. The building where we go to networking is service dogs only.
Right.
I don't bring my dog in there because he's not a service animal.
Right.
Now, when you go into these places, these people bring these dogs and they just cut them loose. They're number one, that's against the law because it's the leash laws. That's a dog at large now. And if that dog does something, they are now financially liable. If your dog is on the leash, you're covered.
Right.
Now, with that, why would you do that to somebody?
I don't.
The entitlement involved drives me insane.
I know. So there's somebody clearly not practicing good dog etiquette.
Think about it. If you would have responded as that dog was coming up aggressively, where you would have shoved it away with your foot or something, and how they would have gotten mad at you.
Of course. Yeah.
Well, sunshine, that's not how this works.
Right. Right. So that's an example of kind of a bad situation, and why I asked the question. When you bring your dog to the park, what you're saying is before you bring your dog to the park, how well behaved is your dog at home? Have you practiced with your dog on the leash in your house, and how
you have to give your dog a foundation to work from. You don't just take them and drop them into a busy situation and expect to just train with them.
Right.
We have to build them up. That's why I'm stair-step dog training. We do everything one step at a time.
Right.
We build off of the last. So when we work with this, my first week of whether it's private lesson or when I bring a dog in for training, I always start on a long line. And this works. If I could get everybody just to do this simple exercise. You put your dog on a long line, just put them on a plain training collar, and your job is to walk around without talking to your dog. Think in terms of just go the opposite direction of your dog.
Right. So they get used to being next
They
to you.
get used to moving with you because you're not asking them to do anything else. We're not healing. We're not sitting. We aren't doing anything. You're just moving with me.
Right.
We're simplifying things where a lot of trainers start with heel and sit. I don't start with that. I start with the long line to teach them to pay attention first. And I will use all kinds of distraction, whether, oh, look, it's an open gate. Hey, we're at the park. There's squirrels there. Cars, if they're a car chaser, we definitely have to teach them not to do that. But, oh, I opened the front door. Nope, that's no reason to not pay attention to me.
Right.
And I just walk away from
So
the
being
door.
on that line, they realize they only have a certain limit, and they know that if you're not walking that direction, they can't go that way. They eventually learn that.
Well, the hardest part for people with it is giving the dog the slack so they can make their mistake and learn from it.
Right.
It's how we learn.
Right.
You made mistakes, you learned from it, and now you do it better.
So that's another key here. I think that the two keys so far, number one, be aware of your emotions
Oh, absolutely.
and give the dog enough slack, but not too much slack.
Well, I use a 15-foot line. I
Right.
give them the whole 15 feet,
Right.
and then I walk around with them. That gives them room to make their mistakes, but it also, because I'm holding the end,
Right.
they can learn how to get the slack themselves.
Right.
Without me giving it to them. They're earning that slack by moving with me. That means they get to be comfortable. And like I said earlier, dogs always seek their own comfort.
So going back to this part, if you've done some of the work ahead of time, your experience in the park will be a lot better. Would you say allowing your dog to approach other dogs? What's your thoughts on that?
It depends on the other dog.
So what are you looking for in the other dog where you would say, I will allow my dog to approach that dog? Do you ask permission of the other dog owner?
Absolutely, you ask permission.
Okay, so let's go through some of these unwritten rules that need to be written down somewhere.
Apparently, yeah. Well, before you have to ask the other dog owner if it's okay if you approach.
Right.
Because you don't know that dog.
Right.
It's no different than what we teach our children.
Right.
You know, you ask the owner before you touch the dog.
Right.
A lot of adults forget that. We'll
Yes.
get into that in a minute because I
want to go there with
let's
people.
go there.
We're going to definitely go there because
But
that's a common thing.
Then you have to watch the body language.
Right.
You know, how are they approaching each other? Are
Right.
they approaching head to head?
Right.
Because that's generally going to spark a fight.
Right.
That's aggressive. Just like you see two guys in a bar coming up face to face.
Right.
Or are they more relaxed? Are
Right.
are their
Tail-
tails down and wagging, or are they straight up and wagging? I mean, there's a lot into dog body language.
Yeah.
You know, are their hackles up? Are they relaxed? Are they interested in sniffing each other? That's the first thing. Is let's sniff each other first.
Right.
That's their introduction.
Right.
Because you got to remember, dogs use their nose like people
That's a
use their
handshake.
eyes.
That's a handshake.
That's a handshake to
Yeah.
them.
So if you're seeing some hair on the back of their neck and things like that, maybe it's not a good idea for your dog.
Maybe it's not a good idea.
To have your...
Don't ignore that
So
stuff.
always step one, get permission from the dog owner. Is it okay? Do you ask if their dog's a friendly dog? Is that even a fair
Yeah,
question?
does your dog like other dogs?
Okay, does your dog like other dogs?
Because some dogs don't.
Okay.
You know, like my dog loves other dogs.
Right.
And, he's been around a ton of dogs.
Right.
But even then, there's some dogs that will come in for training he won't necessarily be around because they're not that friendly, at least not until we get some training
Right.
in them. And even then, I don't expect them to play. I just expect them to be tolerant.
And I've noticed that when I walk her, that there are certain dogs there's immediate rapport. And then it's kind of hit and miss. I'm like, the one dog, like this morning, I thought, oh, she's going to get along. She's like growling at this little terrier, this little short-haired, like, got her going about that dog. I couldn't figure it out, but it was just, I don't know. I couldn't.
Have you ever met somebody that you took a dislike to immediately?
I mean, there's you feel something about it. You get a certain sense about them. I try to overcome it, but there is a certain feeling you get from different people. I guess
Yeah.
the dogs have that.
They absolutely do, because this is response of body language. I mean, when you see them growling and barking or snapping at each other, you've already missed 95% of the conversation that's
Yes,
happened.
yeah, we're not privy
So
to that.
it could be little things
Right.
of the eye contact, how they were standing. I mean, there's so much that goes in. You got to remember, we're in a political season. We're going to see all these body language experts on the news
Right.
dissecting how these candidates gave speeches and all that.
Right.
Those guys can't even read a Dick and Jane book compared to how dogs can read body language.
I agree. They're picking up on so many things that we're not aware of.
You cannot hide anything from your dog. They know exactly how you feel at any given moment. You might hide it from me. You can't hide it from the dog.
Yeah, it's amazing. You said something that really touched me. You said, and after working with dogs, I don't know, they're so good in so many ways that we really don't deserve them. Like, unpack that for me. What did you mean by that? Like, 'cause that really hit me. I really felt that, and because I have had so many good experience with dogs, but what did you mean by that?
Dogs are so tolerant of us. Now, keep in mind, we've had dogs for 50,000 years. No, we didn't go out and find wolf puppies and raise them. That doesn't work. Dogs domesticated themselves to us because the friendliest wolves would get the best feeding because they could come closer to us to eat our scraps.
Right.
And then we learned, hey, these guys will bark when something comes around.
Right.
And we actually have a lot of similarities to dogs. And there's some that even say we kind of domesticated each other a little bit through the process. Now with that, dogs are so tolerant of us
They're so forgiving.
And all you know, if I screw up when I'm training, the dog will get right over it. I won't necessarily get over it for myself, but the dog will be like, yeah, it's okay, bro. So
we need more of that, don't we?
well, yeah, we need more of that because we can learn a lot from dogs.
Yeah.
About just how to approach the world, deal with what's in front of you. Remember, you remember things that are repetitive.
Yes.
So if something bad keeps happening when you do this, stop doing this.
Yes.
That's how dogs work. But of course, we're human. We're not that bright.
So let's get into the interaction that will always happen if you have a dog. You'll be walking somewhere and there'll be a little kid that wants to pet your dog. Mm-hmm. What's the best way to handle that situation?
Number one, know your dog. Does your dog even like kids?
Right.
Or is your dog questionable? If there's any question whether your dog likes kids or not, it's probably best that the kids don't touch them.
Right.
Now with that, the child should always ask, and I have literally had parents stand there and tell their kids they need to ask me to pet the dog and then immediately turn around and pet my dog without asking me. So they need to, I'm always advocating for the dog. If somebody's charging in to pet my dog, I will step in between.
Right.
And bodyguard my dog.
Right. If they don't ask permission.
If they don't ask permission. Or I will call them out if somebody walks past me and reaches down and touches my dog.
Right.
Okay. It's no different than like if you're walking through the store with your child and somebody comes up and starts playing with your kid. Okay, that's a quick way to get the police called on you.
Right. Right.
But for some reason they think it's okay.
It's something like an instinct where you want to pet a dog. It's just an instinct that we all have, but we need to learn to ask permission first.
Well, the parents are good about telling their kids to ask permission.
Right.
But a lot of times they don't ask, they reach in and do it, which the reason we have kids
they want to make sure the dog's okay first.
They want to make sure that the dog's okay, the child's not going to be bitten.
Right.
It's a safety thing, just like teaching a kid to look both ways across the street.
Right.
But as an adult, you can't reach in and just start petting a dog just because you're an adult. That's like saying, I don't have to look both ways before crossing the street anymore because I'm an adult.
So the public service announcement here is,
don't pet other dogs without permission.
Get permission first. And the first time this happened to me is I wanted to pet a service dog.
Oh.
And I didn't know, but I didn't do it. But there's something inside me that just loves dogs and you just can't help yourself.
Oh, and service dogs are the worst.
Dogs, like,
it's the worst with them because it's that forbidden fruit.
Right. And so I almost coaxed it into, but I realized that, wait a second, I'm stepping into, this is a different scenario here. This is a true service dog. This wasn't just like, oh, I'm going to buy a vest and call it a service dog. This was actually, somebody's service animal that they needed for whatever reason. I didn't get into it, but I felt that kind of pang inside of me, like, I wanted to pet the animal, but I realized my smarter voice is like, they're doing their thing. And that was the turning point for me, is like, and are there times where you can pet service dogs?
You're not supposed to.
Okay.
The idea behind that is when you think of a service animal, you have to think in terms of that's like somebody's wheelchair or their walker or their cane.
Right.
So if you come up and interfere with somebody's wheelchair,
right,
think about how much of a jerk you look like. It's the same thing with service animals.
Like you're trying to adjust the settings on their wheelchair.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's like, why are you messing with this person's wheelchair? Well, why are you messing with somebody's service animal?
Right.
And it's the worst with them because people look at it as the forbidden fruit and they double down at wanting to pet.
Right.
I've had people sneak up behind me when I'm working with a service animal to try to pet them.
So it's a hard, because it's just an instinct, but we got to realize that we're getting into a zone that we're affecting the training of a very critical element here by interfering there. That's what we're doing. And just because we want that payoff of that pet.
And interference with a service animal in a lot of jurisdictions is actually a misdemeanor. You can actually be arrested for it.
I did not know that. I did not know that. Now, one of the things that you said you do is you bring your dog out in the public. What are some of the places that after you've done the foundation, after you've got the training, what are some of the kind of good places to take your dog beyond just the park that you feel are kind of a good public square to take your animal once you've gotten that foundation?
This is one of the great things about living in Florida is you have all of these places available. The places that are dog friendly, there are Lowe's Home Improvement, Home Depot, both are dog friendly. Bass Pro Shop, I go to the Bass Pro Shop on Gatlin. It's dog friendly. The Tractor Supplies.
Again, if your dog
is
behave, right? Do you know?
Well, and that's the key to it. People
Right.
will bring their ill-behaved dog into those places,
Right.
and cause chaos. Well, eventually, if there's too much chaos going on, the stores will ban it.
Right,
We don't want them to ban it. We want them to be dog friendly.
right.
So it's imperative that our dogs be ambassadors
Yes.
to the rest of the dog world,
Yes.
so they can continue to go into these places.
I like what you said. Ambassadors to the rest of the dog world.
Yeah, I mean, that's just it.
Yeah.
You want your dog to be. I used to have Rottweilers, and that was back when they were the scary breed.
Right.
It always runs in phases. In the 60s, it was German Shepherds. Then the 70s, it was Dobermans. In the 80s and early 90s, it was Rottweilers. And then now it's Pit Bulls, whatever. I wanted my dogs to be ambassadors for the breed. I wanted them that's how I got into training.
Right.
Is I wanted my dog to be an ambassador for the breed, where they were well behaved, they listened, I could take them anywhere, and it was fantastic. And that's when I really started studying on training.
Amazing.
See, full circle.
It is a full circle. Can it, if someone says, well, I just can't afford dog training. Like, I have a comeback for that, but I'm curious. I'll share what I think is the right answer for that. But what would you say to them? If they say, God, it just seems so expensive, dog training. What do you say to that person?
Well, over the course of the dog's life, it's not really that expensive. And without the training, the damage they can cause is a lot more expensive. I had somebody call me, went out and looked at the dog. It was a nice, I think it was a golden retriever. Beautiful dog. It was young. It was like 8 months old at the time. And the guy was just like, you're just too expensive. So he didn't train. He called me back in about 4 months going, hey, yeah, I need to do something with my dog. And it's like, oh, okay, well, what changed your mind? He ate my $8,000 couch. Okay.
And that's one example, but they
That's
could hurt themselves if they're not trained right. They can
run out in traffic?
hurt their neighbor. You could hurt your neighbor. If you want your dog to live a long time, don't you want to listen to you, like when it's doing something that's dangerous to itself?
Well, and everybody thinks in terms of like aggression. Oh my gosh, that dog could bite you. But also overly friendly dogs can be just as dangerous. I worked with an Airedale that knocked over the mother.
Oh, that's
of
right.
the guy, broke her hip.
What did that cost? And
3 months in a rehab hospital.
so you got to work with him after the fact.
I worked with him after the fact.
Not before.
Lovely dog, trained up beautifully.
Right.
Was absolutely.
But had they got the training initially,
then it would have never been an issue.
So I think a lot of times people, they think they can do it themselves, and they can, but to me it goes to this. How many dogs have you trained? Like 2 or 3 in your lifetime? Wouldn't you rather have somebody that's trained thousands of dogs?
Let's talk about that real quick.
Yeah.
You hear it all the time. I've trained thousands of dogs. A lot of times they're full of stuff.
But literally you have trained thousands.
Over the last 17 years, I've probably trained a couple thousand dogs.
Right.
Yeah.
So my point is, it's not your first rodeo. You've made the mistakes for the owner. You know the fastest way to get to where you need to be. You know what it takes. You paint a realistic picture of what's involved and where the dog can get to. Why go it solo when you have an expert you can call on? That's the head scratcher for me. So when we got our puppy came into our life through some crazy, I don't know how we ended up with this dog, but we did. So my urging to you, if you have a dog and you want it trained and you want it to you want to learn some of the things, I urge you to call Greg Hollen at Stair Step Dog Training. Or if it doesn't work for you, at least get with a trainer.
Get with a trainer.
Yes.
Somebody.
Yes. So how do they get a hold of you, Greg?
They can call me.
Yep.
561-578-7672. That number's also on my Facebook page and on my
Stair Step.
On my stairstep.com page.
And it is your first step to a better dog.
First step to a better dog.
All
It's
right.
calling me.
Thank you, Greg, so much for being on the show, and thank you for listening in for Careology. Thank you so much.
You've been listening to Careology, the science of caring. Check it out. YouTube.